His wife left him and their paralyzed son for another man after he went bankrupt. 10 years later, she knocks at their door. "You're nothing but bad luck, Daniel. You're bankrupt and will soon be homeless. I'm done being nanny to a crippled child. He's yours. From now on, he's your burden. I refuse to be part of your miserable life." Those were the devastating words Clarissa Whitmore spat at her husband before slamming the divorce papers on his chests and walk out with another man, leaving behind her disabled son and their crumbling dreams. She thought she was upgrading to a better life. She had no idea that greed has a way of destroying everything it touches, and that the man she abandoned would rebuild his life into something more beautiful than she could ever imagine. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, greed, and the true cost of betrayal. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a physical blow to your chest? How do you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The late afternoon sun spilled through the wide glass windows of Daniel Whitmore's office, lighting up the blueprints scattered across his mahogany desk. His phone buzzed nonstop with congratulatory calls from suppliers, clients, even his bank manager. For once, life was exactly as he had dreamed. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie, a smile tugging at his lips. After years of sweat and grit, his construction company had secured its biggest contract yet, a multi-million-dollar housing project that would put Whitmore Construction on the map of Houston's largest developers. "Dad," Eli's voice echoed down the hallway. A moment later, the 7-year-old burst through the office door, cheeks flushed, his dark curls bouncing as he ran. "Mom said you got the job." Daniel caught his son mid-leap, lifting him high in the air. "That's right, champ. Your dad's going to build the tallest homes in Houston." Clarissa followed, her heels clicking delicately on the tiled floor. She was stunning as always, her hair perfectly styled, her dress hugging her figure. She leaned against the doorframe, smiling, though her eyes lingered on the contract folder more than on her husband. "Tall homes mean tall profits, don't they?" she teased, brushing invisible dust from her nails. Daniel set Eli down gently. "It means we're secure, Clarissa. No more sleepless nights about bills. I'll finally give you the life you deserve." Her smile widened. "That's what I like to hear." For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. Family, love, success. Daniel believed nothing could shake it. That weekend, Daniel met with Richard Hale at a buzzing downtown bar. Richard had been his closest friend since college days, loyal, dependable, or so Daniel thought. The two men clinked glasses over the contract. "To big money, my brother." Richard grinned, his voice loud over the music. Daniel nodded. "I need you on this, Rich. I can't afford mistakes. The client wants premium quality." "Of course," Richard replied smoothly, lighting a cigar. "You just focus on the big picture. I'll handle supplies. You know me, I don't cut corners." Daniel trusted him as he always had. He didn't see the flicker in Richard's eyes, the quiet greed lurking behind the laughter. Weeks later, the construction site buzzed with life. Trucks hauled in concrete, steel beams stretched toward the sky, and workers shouted directions. Daniel walked the grounds with pride, hard hat on, clipboard in hand. But one Tuesday morning, disaster struck. The ground trembled with a violent crack. Shouts erupted as one of the half-built structures groaned under its weight. In seconds, the upper floors collapsed, steel twisting, concrete dust rising like a storm. Men scrambled for cover. Daniel's heart stopped. "Get everyone out!" he screamed, running toward the chaos. By some miracle, no lives were lost, but the damage was catastrophic. After the collapse, Daniel drove straight to Richard's office, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The glass door bore Richard's name in bold letters, but inside, the desk was cleared, files missing, chairs stacked against the wall. "Where's Mr. Hale?" Daniel demanded of the building's janitor. The old man shrugged. "Packed up yesterday. Said he was traveling. No forwarding address." For 2 days, Daniel searched, calling numbers that no longer rang, visiting bars they once frequented, even stopping by Richard's apartment. The locks had been changed. It was as though his closest friend had vanished into thin air. Each unanswered question dug deeper into Daniel's chest. Betrayal didn't just come from strangers. Sometimes it wore the face of family. News reporters arrived within hours, cameras flashing, microphones shoved at Daniel's face. What went wrong, Mr. Whitmore? Were substandard materials used? Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. The client canceled the contract that afternoon. They demanded repayment of the advance. At home, Daniel sat with Clarissa at the kitchen table, papers spread before them. "I'll take a loan," he said firmly. "I'll mortgage the company, even the house. We'll recover." Clarissa's hand hovered over the paperwork, her face tight. "You really think you can bounce back from this?" "I know I can," Daniel whispered. "For you, for Eli." But fate wasn't finished. One rainy evening, Clarissa drove Eli home from school. A speeding truck ran a red light. The screech of tires, the shatter of glass, the sickening crunch of metal, then silence. Daniel raced to the hospital, his shirt half-buttoned, his hands trembling as he pushed through double doors. Doctors worked frantically behind glass walls. When the surgeon finally emerged, his words shattered Daniel's soul. "Your son's spine was severely damaged. Probability of walking again is 50-50. Daniel staggered back, clutching the wall. Clarissa covered her face, sobbing. Eli lay unconscious in the ICU, his small body wrapped in bandages, machines beeping around him. In that moment, Daniel's empire, his dreams, even his breath, all of it collapsed into rubble. The Whitmore home no longer felt like the sanctuary it once was. Daniel woke before dawn, left sweat-soaked, and came home long after sunset. The collapse of his major project had crippled his finances, but he refused to fold. He picked up smaller contracts, renovations, repairs, labor jobs, anything to bring in cash. At night, when the house finally quieted, he sat at the kitchen table, calculator in one hand, mortgage notice in the other. His company was hanging by a thread, but he clung to it. If he could just make the next payment, if he could just cover Eli's therapy bill, maybe things would steady. "Daniel," Clarissa's voice was sharp, cutting through his thoughts one evening. She stood at the counter, arms crossed, silk robe loosely tied around her waist. "Do you ever look at yourself? You're not a businessman anymore. You're a laborer, a broken man." Daniel rubbed his temples. "I'm fighting for us, for Eli. That boy needs every chance we can give him." Her laugh was bitter. "And what about me? Do I not exist in this marriage? Do I not deserve more than this suffocating life?" Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at her, really looked at her. The way she dressed for nowhere in particular, the way her eyes avoided his. Something was shifting inside her, and it terrified him. While Daniel carried Eli through endless hours of therapy, Clarissa's world was shifting elsewhere. It began at a charity gala she had attended without Daniel, claiming she needed to network. That night, she met David Langston. He was wealthy, polished, with a confidence that made the room bend toward him. He noticed her before she noticed him, and when he finally approached, his words were coated in honey. "You're wasted on that husband of yours," he whispered, leaning close as a jazz band played. "A woman like you deserves more. Jewels, freedom, not hospital corridors and overdue bills." Clarissa told herself it was harmless. A drink, a laugh. But the next week, when Daniel spent hours pushing Eli's wheelchair through physiotherapy halls, Clarissa was slipping into a black Mercedes parked just outside. One meeting became many. Lunches blurred into midnight phone calls. Soon, she found herself in David's penthouse suite, wrapped in luxury that felt like the life she once dreamed of. When Daniel stumbled home late, covered in plaster dust, she told him she'd been shopping. When he called her during hospital visits, she said she was with friends. She had crafted a double life, one of cold indifference at home and intoxicating promises with David. The next morning, the mail arrived. Daniel had left early for work, so Clarissa retrieved it. Among the envelopes was a thick letter from the bank. She slid it open, her eyes scanning the words. Final reminder, mortgage payment due. Her chest tightened, but instead of showing Daniel, she slid the letter into her handbag. She knew exactly what it meant. The house was at risk. That afternoon, she met David in a candlelit restaurant downtown. His driver opened the car door for her, and the maitre d' guided her to the table already waiting with a chilled bottle of champagne. "I can't keep doing this," Clarissa admitted, her voice trembling as she scanned the letter in her purse. "Daniel's drowning, and he's dragging me down with him." David smirked, leaning forward. "Then let me save you. Divorce him. Walk away. I'll handle everything." Clarissa exhaled, her shoulders sagging in relief. "You'd really do that?" David's hand brushed hers across the table. "A woman like you should never have to beg. Leave him. Be mine." A week later, Daniel returned home bone-weary, his hands raw from another day on site. On the dining table sat 2 envelopes. Clarissa stood beside them, her suitcase zipped and ready at the door. "What's this?" he asked, heart hammering. "Open them," she said coldly. The first was a mortgage warning. The second, divorce papers. His throat tightened. "Clarissa, don't do this. Not now. Eli needs you. Needs us." Her voice cut him like glass. "You're nothing but a bad luck, Daniel. You are bankrupt and will soon become homeless, and I refuse to be part of your miserable life. I'm done being nanny to a crippled child. He's yours. From now on, he's your burden." Eli had wheeled into the doorway unnoticed. His lip quivered, tears brimming as he whispered, "Mom, you don't mean that." But she did. She walked out to the waiting Mercedes, leaving Daniel and Eli in silence that felt heavier than death. The silence Clarissa left behind clung to the house like damp air that refused to lift. Daniel moved through the rooms with the heavy steps of a man carrying too much on his back. He prepared Eli's breakfast, checked his son's medications, and folded the divorce papers he couldn't bring himself to sign, sliding them into the drawer as if hiding them could erase the truth. Eli tried to stay cheerful for his father's sake, cracking jokes in his small, tired voice, but the sparkle that once lit the boy's eyes had dimmed. The wheelchair was a constant reminder of the accident, and Clarissa's absence was a wound he didn't know how to name. At night, Daniel heard him cry softly into his pillow, muffling the sound so his father wouldn't notice. Daniel always noticed. Bills stacked higher on the kitchen counter, the mortgage statement glaring at him like an enemy. He had mortgaged both the house and the company yard, believing he could dig himself out after the collapse. But each time he made a payment, another arrived, heavier than the last. He still took smaller contracts, swinging a hammer alongside men he once employed, but the money vanished almost as soon as he earned it. Still, every morning he carried his son into the truck and drove to physiotherapy. It was the one routine that mattered, the one battle he refused to surrender. That morning, Eli gripped the parallel bars, his small arms shaking with effort. Grace crouched beside him, her tone calm but encouraging. "One step, Eli. Don't think about both legs. Just think about one." Eli gritted his teeth, sweat sliding down his temples, and tried to move his right foot forward. It twitched, shifted slightly, then gave way. He slumped back into the wheelchair with a frustrated sigh. "You did better than yesterday," Grace said, crouching to meet his eyes. "Progress is progress." Eli nodded faintly, though disappointment was written all over his face. Across the room, Daniel sat slouched in a chair by the window, his gaze fixed not on his son, but on the floor. His elbows rested on his knees, his hands twisted together tightly. He wasn't hearing Grace's praise. He wasn't seeing Eli's effort. His mind was elsewhere, on foreclosure letters, on Clarissa's last cruel words, on the gnawing fear that he was failing his son in every possible way. Grace had been watching him closely for weeks, noting his quiet strength, his constant presence. But today was different. Today, Daniel looked like a man unraveling. When the session ended and Eli wheeled himself toward the toy shelf in the corner, Grace crossed the room and sat opposite Daniel. Her voice was low but steady. "You weren't here today." He blinked, startled. "What do you mean? I've been sitting right here." "You know that's not what I mean," she said gently. "You're usually encouraging him, always pushing him to fight. Today you were somewhere else entirely." Daniel tried to deflect, but the words caught in his throat. For months he had carried his pain in silence, refusing to let anyone see him break. But something in Grace's eyes, calm, compassionate, unflinching, made it impossible to hold back. His voice came out raw, stripped of pride. "I mortgaged the house and the company after the collapse. Every cent I make goes into bills and therapy. Clarissa's gone. It's just me now, and no matter how hard I work, it's never enough. I don't know how much longer I can keep it together." The confession stunned even him. He buried his face in his hands, ashamed of the cracks showing. Grace didn't rush to answer. She let the silence settle, then placed a hand lightly on his arm. Her tone was firm but kind. "You don't have to carry this alone. Daniel, come stay at my place, you and Eli. I have a spare room. It isn't much, but it's safe. And you need a safe place right now." He shook his head almost violently. "I can't do that to you. I can't bring my mess into your life." "You're not bringing a mess," Grace said, her voice unwavering. "You're bringing a little boy who deserves stability, and a father who deserves a chance to breathe. Let me help." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to refuse out of pride. But when he glanced at Eli, his small frame bent over a toy robot pretending not to notice the grown-up conversation, his resistance collapsed. He nodded slowly, tears stinging his eyes. "Thank you, Grace. I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say anything," she replied softly. "Just accept it." And for the first time since Clarissa walked out, Daniel felt a hand reaching toward him, not to take, but to hold. The knock on the door came early, before Daniel had even finished pouring Eli's cereal. He froze when he saw the uniformed officer standing on the porch, a folded document in his hand. "Mr. Whitmore," the man said, his tone flat but not unkind. "This is the final notice. You're required to vacate the property immediately. The bank will be sending a crew this afternoon." Her bungalow was modest, with peeling paint on the porch railing and a garden of wildflowers pushing up through the fence. But to Eli, who had cried himself to sleep in a truck the night before, it looked like heaven. Grace opened the door, ushering them in with a warmth that left Daniel unsteady. Eli wheeled himself across the threshold, his eyes wide. "It smells nice," he whispered. Daniel lingered in the doorway, staring at the homey details, the knitted blanket on the sofa, the stack of books on the coffee table, the light that felt softer than anything he had known in months. Pride clawed at him, but gratitude overwhelmed it. That night, as Eli slept soundly in the spare room, Daniel sat on the porch with Grace. The hum of cicadas filled the silence between them. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted quietly. Grace handed him a mug of tea, her eyes steady. "You already have. You didn't give up, Daniel, and that's where rebuilding begins." For the first time in months, he believed her. Life in Grace's bungalow was modest, but to Daniel and Eli it felt like a sanctuary. The walls were painted a soft cream, the furniture plain but comfortable, and the small guest room quickly filled with Eli's toys and therapy equipment. It wasn't their house, it wasn't his company, but it was warm, safe, and steady. Each morning, as Daniel left for the site with his lunch packed in a paper bag, Grace grabbed her clinic badge and stethoscope, heading the opposite direction. Her days were filled with patients, children struggling to regain balance after surgeries, elderly men relearning to walk after strokes, athletes recovering from injuries. She carried the same calm firmness with all of them that she carried with Eli. "One step at a time," she would say, guiding trembling legs or coaxing reluctant hands. Patients trusted her because she never gave false hope, but she never let them give up either. When her shift ended, she drove home tired, but still stopped by Eli's side, encouraging him through a few extra stretches before dinner. Therapy doesn't end at the clinic, she teased gently. It's a lifestyle. Daniel often stood in the doorway, watching quietly. He had seen strength in men on job sites, but there was something about Grace's steady patience that humbled him. She didn't just heal bodies, she gave people back their dignity. And in her care, Eli was blossoming in ways Daniel had thought impossible. Daniel picked up labor wherever he could find it, hauling cement on construction sites, painting walls in half-finished homes, even sweeping up debris long after others had clocked out. Men who once called him boss now handed him shovels and barked orders without recognition. At first, the humiliation burned, but Daniel reminded himself, this was survival. This was for Eli. Pride could wait. Grace kept watch over Eli while Daniel worked. She guided him through stretches and exercises, patient even when frustration boiled over. Some nights when Daniel returned bone-tired, he found Eli grinning as he managed to balance upright for a few seconds without support. Grace celebrated each small step like a victory. "You see?" she said one evening, clapping her hands softly as Eli leaned on his crutches. "Your strength is coming back." Daniel leaned against the doorway, his throat tight. "That's my boy," he whispered, pride shining through exhaustion. But the world had not forgotten Daniel completely. One blistering afternoon, he was working on a downtown construction site, sweat streaming down his back as he hefted bags of cement. Dust clung to his shirt. His muscles screamed with fatigue, yet he pressed on. A sleek black car rolled to a stop near the foreman's trailer. Workers glanced up briefly, but Daniel didn't. The door opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out, speaking briskly with the foreman. His voice carried authority, the kind Daniel once commanded. The man's gaze swept across the site, sharp and searching. Then it froze. His breath caught. "Daniel?" The name rang out across the noise of the machines. Daniel paused, lifting his head slowly. Dust streaked his face, sweat rolled down his brow, but the eyes that met Collins's were unmistakable. Collins took a step closer, disbelief written across his features. "Daniel Whitmore? My God, it's really you." Daniel straightened, shoulders tense, unsure what to say. He managed a hoarse reply. "Jonathan, it's been a long time." Collins shook his head, still staring. "What are you doing here, working like this? You don't belong here. You're the reason I ever made it through college. You saved me, Daniel. And now I find you hauling cement?" Daniel dropped his gaze again, embarrassed. "Life doesn't always turn out the way we think." Collins's voice grew firm, almost fierce. "No, not for you. Not like this. Finish your shift today, but tomorrow we talk. I owe you more than you realize, and I won't let this be your ending." For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir inside him that wasn't despair. Hope. Watch out for part 2. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.